Good morning, Father Christian Holly. On this January 27th, 2019, can you tell me, Father Christian Holly, what is the sermon about today?
So, James McMurtry, a local musician, wrote this opening line that went, Aunt Clara kept the Bible right next to the phone in case she needed a quote while she talked to someone. And it always struck me about how much Scripture plays a role in kind of turning situations around for the better. So we're going to talk about the power of Scripture, the power that it displayed in the Hebrew Bible today from Ezra and Nehemiah, the power it played in Jesus' life in our Luke reading, and the power it plays in our life together. So a lot about Scripture today and how it helps our lives for the better.
Words about words. Sounds fun.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Please be seated. Aunt Clara kept the Bible right next to the phone in case she needed a quote while she talked to someone. Those are the opening lyrics to a James McMurtry song. But I think all of us have Aunt Clara in our lives somewhere. There's that person who is able to offer just the right verse of Scripture to change our outlook on a situation. And usually to change the outlook for the better. Growing up, I thought this matching of Scripture to situations was a spiritual gift, kind of like tongues. You either had it or you didn't. But that's not true. Injecting the appropriate Scripture into a situation is a practice born of study. And one, if I might say, one that our vestry did a really good job of injecting into our meetings and our retreat this past weekend. I think of Matt Thompson, who brought us the word from Leviticus and Martin Luther King Jr., the spirit of reconciliation. I thought of Janine Adenero, who used the Psalms to help capture our excitement and a little bit of our trepidation for 2019. Gabrielle Fields read to us from Revelation to bring a sense of renewal and hope to all that we did. And then Mandy Hubbard reminded us of our lives together as a Christian body by reading from Romans 12. There is power in Scripture. Power to proclaim good news to the poor, release to the captives, sight to the blind, and the year of the Lord's favor to all people. People who may be living under the bridge at 183. People who may be trying to find that right assisted living home. People who may be challenged by balancing their church commitments with youth sports. Scripture can speak into all those situations. As we look at the readings from Ezra and Nehemiah, we can see that those individuals understood the power of Scripture. Our Old Testament reading today comes from a time when the Hebrew elites were released from Babylonian captivity and had returned to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. 70 years prior to this event, when the Babylonians had destroyed the temple in 586, they didn't take everyone into captivity. They mainly took the political leaders and the religious teachers from Jerusalem off to Babylon. So in today's reading, you have the descendants of an elite class, raised in the capital of an empire, returning to a town where the common Hebrew person was left to fend for him or herself. The scene wasn't all rejoicing and wine. There was some noticeable tension between the respective classes of Hebrews. What they needed for reconciliation and solidarity was a common belief, and Scripture was that tie that bound them back together. The scene described in today's reading from Nehemiah is no accident. This was a performative reading meant to galvanize a population. The Jewish Study Bible, which is a translation that I highly recommend to all of you out there, especially in your Hebrew Bible studies, has a clearer translation of a number of these verses. And it says, Ezra the scribe stood upon a wooden tower made for that purpose. Nehemiah, the governor at the time, is setting Ezra up as a new Moses. Ezra is giving the law yet again, reenacting the scene from Mount Sinai. Ezra is using the same words Moses used, telling the same story of how God favored the Hebrew people, how God delivered them from the captivity of an empire, how God called them, all of them, his own. And once this story is re-embedded in all the people, Nehemiah pops up, and he reinforces the solidarity by ordering the people not to be sad, but to be merry, and to share the festivities with those who had little amongst them. The law becomes good news. Backed by celebration and community goodwill, this performative reading of Scripture ushers in a new era for the Hebrew people, an era we call the Second Temple period. So with that story in mind, let's turn our attention to Luke's Gospel. Many of the elements are the same. The Hebrew people are once again under the rule of a foreign empire, the Romans this time. There is tension between the temple elite and the common Israelites. Yet, they are all gathered together for the reading of Scripture. When it comes time for the lessons, Jesus stands up and reads from a time of captivity. He chooses Isaiah 61 to read from, a text which references the Babylonian captivity, and its purpose was to unify and comfort an estranged and divided people. And just like Ezra and Nehemiah, this is a performative reading that Jesus is doing. It's a reading where the reader is taking on the authority of Moses and leading the Hebrew people into a new era. Jesus comes right out and says as much when he tells the people, "Today this Scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Moses and his lineage gave the Hebrew people the first temple period. Ezra, Nehemiah, and their lineage gave the people the second temple period. And Jesus and his lineage give all people a new temple period. But unlike the previous two, this temple is his body, and it is established forever. So this is where it gets a little meta. Let's look at what just happened in our life together. We are not a people under foreign rule of a distant empire, but we are a people who find ourselves divided against ourselves in many ways. Yet despite our differences, we still gather together when Scripture is read, and we stand when we hear the Word of God. Brothers and sisters, when we read the Gospel, Jesus is in our midst, and the pattern established by God on Mount Sinai is repeatable down to this day. People stand. The Spirit speaks through Scripture, and societies change. So as you leave here today, I want you to leave with the words of Nehemiah echoing in your head. Go your way. Eat the fat and drink sweet wine, and send portions of them to those for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy to our Lord. And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Amen. Amen.